All right, let's go over how we're going to use the rotoscope brush in After Effects. So I've already started on one here, but I'll go back to the beginning to sort of start us off. I have this scene in Alice in Wonderland that I want to cut out the character. Let's go back to the actual composition to kind of see what's going on. I'll turn off the effects here. Actually, I'll just start over, so I'll turn that off completely. So what I've done is I've taken this movie and I've shortened it to just be this long, so that this is the part that I'm going to rotoscope. And that's the important first part, is to find the section that you want and then make the composition that length, probably. It just makes it a lot easier to kind of see. This is one scene, right, where it starts and it ends, and so I'm good to go. I'm using animation. And so the benefit of using animation is there's fewer frames because they animate at, instead of 30 frames per second, probably 12 or 18. But then there's some drawbacks in that there's big movements between frames, whereas video has has more frames, so there's more progression. And so you'll see how rotoscope works for that versus something else. We have the rotoscope brush over here, and so I just need to double click the layer to come into the layer viewer, and then that's where I can use the rotoscope brush. We're just going to start. I have a brush size. It's very small right now. If you hold down Control and drag to the left or the right, you can move the size of the brush. And so I just get a brush size about that big, and I'm going to just start painting the character that I want. And you can see After Effects starting to figure out where the edges are. I'm going to keep adding to it. I don't have to press any extra button to add to it. Just click and drag to make more marks. And again, Control drag to make smaller brush sizes to get into these other details. When it happens like this, where it grabs more than you want, you of course hold down Alt to redraw and take it away. And I'm just going to slowly build this up. I'll even come in here and grab the pipe and the back of his head. It's a lot of work to kind of go through and see what is taken and what is not. All right, so we have that. There's multiple ways we can view that as we look at it. If we turn this off, we can see what it would look like cut out. I can change let me change the background settings so you can see more clearly. And maybe I need, what do I need? Maybe a blue, green. There, that's good. That shows me more of what's been cut off. So you can see it actually, After Effects does a pretty good job of rotoscoping that out. I click this back on, I can see it more. And then there's more views you can work with if you like looking at masks. Click it that way. But yeah, that's essentially it. And then you're just going to go forward frame by frame. You can press the 2 key, number 2. You can also press page down. You can also press Control arrow key left or right to move frame by frame. And then the idea is to propagate this by going frame by frame forward and fixing all the things that you need to fix. So I move forward one frame, and you can tell that After Effects made some mistakes. So I'm just going to fix those mistakes here. I've never actually used the rotoscope brush tool for animation, so I'm kind of curious how well it's going to do, because again, there's fewer frames, but then there's also bigger jumps between frames with animation. And go forward again. And what happens is, hopefully, especially with video, is that it starts to figure things out as you fix it. And let's subtract a little bit more there. And it's probably helpful to jump into these positions to immediately see what's missing and what's not missing, right? Rather than looking at this path, and if it's actually covering everything you want, click this real quick to see if it looks good. Yeah, and that's kind of the main part, is to just come in here frame by frame and fix it. So it's tedious, it's not fun, but it's a lot faster than cutting this out yourself. So let's say you do this. You can come over here and change the settings right here. I found that the preloaded settings in this new version of After Effects work pretty well. So, but you can of course change these things here. You can add motion blur if you're having some issues with motion blur inside the video. Turn that on. If you're noticing a lot of colors coming in from the background, decontaminate edge colors works well too. So that's yeah, kind of it. As I'm not going to go all the way here because it takes a while. But once you're happy with what it has become, actually, there's one more thing I want to show you. So it's not going to work here for this, but if you have issues of, like, let's say a character with hair, an animal, human with little bits of hair, this refine edge tool works really well. How this works is you want to first get a roto brush everywhere on every frame that you like, a kind of rough mask. Then you can go back in using the refine edge tool to let me make the mask bigger to show you. You'll notice it's a different color cursor. And then with this one, just like in Photoshop, whenever you're refining the edge of hair, you just kind of paint in the areas that let's just do it and show you what happens. It's not going to work well for animation, of course, right? But what's really cool is it shows you kind of an X-ray vision of what has happened. And so you can look at the white hairs should show up and the black should be the background, just like your typical mask idea, white reveals, black conceals. And then you just kind of paint around and make these adjustments as necessary. And it's going to work really well. It's going to make a refined mask on top of your rotoscope mask. So let's go back to this. The last thing I wanted to say is, let's say I'm finished here, right? I'm going to move my composition here. What you want to do next is, once you're happy with this roto brush tool, you want to freeze it. Because if you don't do this, what can happen is, if you accidentally make some changes or adjust some things here, it's going to reset itself and try to repropagate. So make sure you freeze it. And you can actually see it's going longer than my composition, and that's because I have it set up longer here. So I could have changed that, but I didn't. And so that will save it. And then what I typically do is I actually come back to the composition and I actually render this out immediately as an alpha channel. So come up to your composition, pre-render any way you want that has a, oh, that's right, I'm in Creative Cloud, so I have to go through, no, I'll do it right here. Cool. So I'm on a PC, so I have AVIs, but I want to have a lossless with alpha channel. I just want to have something that has a alpha channel. So make sure I'm using, again, on a PC, so I'm using an AVI. If you're on a Mac, you could use the movie file, the QuickTime file, RGB plus alpha, and OK it, and then call it something that's alpha. So whatever, Alice alpha, save, and then render that out. And then that way I don't have to worry about the freezing of the propagation. And then I feel like I also save myself some rendering time, some RAM time, because of that effect, because that's a pretty heavy effect that's using it in After Effects. And that should be enough to get you started. If you have any other questions, just ask. Thanks.